The voice was unfamiliar. Not Oscar. Not anyone I recognized. Budit knew my name. The full name pronounced correctly. I'd never told anyone. Here my last name except on the paperwork when I first got the assignment. Oscar called me Randy. Everyone at the station called me Randy. But these voices knew my full name. Randy. Randy Guerrero. Randy. Multiple voices now coming from different directions all around the cabin. They weren't whispering to each other anymore. They were calling to me, trying to get my attention. And they knew exactly who I was. I gripped the flashlight so hard my knuckles oozed. The urge to respond was almost overwhelming. When someone calls your name, especially your full name, every social instinct tells you to answer, to acknowledge them, ignoring any sounds or voices, regardless of urgency or familiarity. Though these voices weren't familiar, that was the problem. Complete strangers were wandering around my cabin at 2 o'clock in the morning, calling my name like they knew me personally. How was that possible? The Scritchingian tin side. Now it sounded like multiple sets of claws working at the walls concentrated. Around the windows, long, deep scrapes that seemed to be trying to dig through the wood itself. The cabin creaked under the pressure, and I started to worry about the structural integrity. These walls were old, weathered from years of mountain weather. How much abuse could they take? Randy, we know you're in there. The voice came from right outside the living room window, maybe 3 feet from where I was lying. Clear as day, no longer whispering. A man's voice, calm and conversational, like he was talking to a friend. Randy Guerrero, Forest Service, badge number 4789. My badge number? Jesus Christ. My badge number. That information wasn't public. It wasn't even in most of the paperwork. You'd have to access specific Forest Service databases to get that kind of have to tell. Who the hell were these people? The scratching stopped abruptly. Complete silence for maybe 30 seconds. Then footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate steps moving toward the front door. I counted them. 5 steps. Then a pause. Someone was standing right in front of the door. The first knock came at 2:35, by my count, but this wasn't the measured knocking from the previous nights. This was aggressive, demanding, someone pounding on the door with both fists, making the entire frame shake. The sound echoed through the cabin, like gunshots. Bang, bang, bang. The door rattled. In its frame, I could hear the hinges creaking under the assault. Bang, bang, bang. Harder this time. The whole cabin seemed to vibrate with each impact. Dust drifted down from the ceiling beams. I waited for a pause, then spoke the required words. There is no one here. The pounding didn't stop. If anything, it got worse, faster, more frantic. The frame groaned with each impact. Andy started to worry it might actually give way. Bang, 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 bang. Continuous. Now, no rhythm or pattern, just relentless hammering that made the entire cabin shake. The windows rattled in their frames. This wasn't knocking anymore. This was an assault. I said the words again, louder. There is no one here. No effect. The pounding continued, joined now by scratching at multiple windows. The sounds overlapped into a cacophony of scraping and banging that seemed to come from every direction at once, like the entire cabin was under siege. Minutes passed. The assault was relentless, never pausing, never slowing down. My watch showed 240 when I checked it. The doorframe was holding, but I could see it flexing with each impact. The hinges were starting to pull away from within. At exactly 250 by my watch, everything stopped. The sudden quiet was almost as unsettling as the noise had been. I lay perfectly still, listening for any sound that might indicate what was happening outside. I stayed motionless on the cot, flashlight gripped in my waiting for something else to happen. But the silence stretched on. Whatever had been attacking the cabin was gone, leaving only the memory of that relentless pounding and the knowledge that they knew far more about me than they should have. I stuffed my gear into the duffel bag, making sure everything was accounted for. Radio, extra batteries, first aid kit, the topographical map Oscar had given me. But my mind kept drifting back to last night, the pounding on the door, the way they'd known my name, my badge number, information that shouldn't have been available to anyone wandering around in the woods. The cabin looked smaller in daylight, less threatening. Just a basic Forest Service station with standard Sioux furniture and supplies. Hard to believe the things that had happened here over the past 4 nights, but the scratches on the window frames were real enough. I checked them this morning. Deep gouges in the wood that definitely hadn't been there when I'd arrived. I swept the floor and wiped down the table, leaving everything the way I'd found it. Standard procedure when vacating a station. The canned goods went back on the shelves in neat rows. The wood stove got cleaned out, the cot got stripped, and the bedding folded. Just another week in the field, according to anyone who might check the logs. The note sat in the center of the table, where I'd found it 5 days ago. Same yellowed paper, same careful handwriting. I'd read those 4 rules so many times I could recite them from memory. Keep all lights off between 1 and 3 a.m. Respond to knocking with, "There is no one here." Avoid the windows completely during those hours. Ignore any sounds or voices outside, no matter how urgent or familiar they seemed. Someone had written those rules for a reason. Someone who'd been through what I'd just experienced, maybe worse. They'd taken the time to preserve that information for whoever came next, and it had probably saved my life, or at least my sanity. I folded the paper carefully and placed it back in the exact spot where I had discovered it. Center of the table positioned so the next person couldn't miss it. Whoever got assigned here after would need those rules. They'd need to know what they were dealing with. Even if they didn't believe it at first. The sound of an engine reached me through the trees. Right on time. I grabbed my duffel and headed outside, squinting in the morning sunlight. A Forest Service truck was making its way down the narrow access road, bouncing over the ruts and potholes. Green paint, standard government plates. My replacement had arrived. The truck pulled up next to mine, and the engine shut off. The driver's door opened, and a ranger stepped out. Medium height, athletic build, short black hair, hewer, the same uniform I did, khaki shirt and dark green pants with black boots. Professional appearance. Everything regulation. "Randy Guerrero," he called out. "That's him." I walked over and extended my hand. "You must be my relief, Evan Ramirez." His handshake was firm, confident. "Chief Warner sent me up to take over I nodded. Evan looked competent enough. Probably had plenty of field experience. He'd need it up here, though he didn't know that yet. "How much did Oscar tell you about the assignment?" "Standard patrol duties. Keep an eye on the area for any unusual activity." He mentioned there had been some missing hikers in the region. Evan glanced around the clearing, taking in the cabin and surrounding forests. "Seems good enough. Quiet. If only he knew. It can be let me show you around. Get your..." I spent the next hour walking Evan through the basics. Showed him the cabin, the supply inventory, the radio set up for daily check-ins with headquarters. We went over the patrol routes on Oscar's topographical map, and I pointed out the key landmarks, the creek to the south, the ridge lines tough north and east, the intersecting trail system. "Water comes from the hand pump out back," I explained, leading him around the cabin's perimeter. "It's good water, but you'll want to treat it anyway. Wood fourth stove is stacked on the side porch. Should be enough to last you through the week." Evan took notes in a small notebook, asking practical questions about radio protocols and patrol schedules. Standard stuff. I kept waiting for him to notice the scratches on the window frames, but he was focused on the operational details. Probably better that way. "Any problems during your week up here?" he asked as we finished the walkthrough. I hesitated. This was the moment I'd been thinking about all morning. How much should I tell him? The rational part of my mind said I should warn him, prepare him for what might happen after dark, but another part wondered if that would just make things worse. Maybe knowing too much in advance would make him paranoid, cause him to make mistakes. "Nothing major," I said finally. "Quiet week, like you said. You'll want to follow standard protocols, especially at night. Keep your radio charged. Stay alert." It wasn't really a lie, more like an incomplete truth. Evan would figure out, rest soon enough, assuming the things in the woods decided to pay him a visit. The note would help him when the time came. That's what it was there for. Sounds straightforward. Evan closed his notebook and slipped it into his shirt pocket. "Appreciate the briefing." We shook hands again, and it threw my duffel into the back of my truck. The engine turned over on the second try, settling into its familiar idle. I'd be glad to get back to civilization, sleep in my own bed without worrying about what might be scratching at the windows. "Take care of yourself up here," I told Devin through the open window. Safe, drive back. I put the truck in gear and started down the access road, watching the cabin shrink in my rearview mirror. Evan was cell-ready, heading inside, probably eager to get settled. I hoped he'd find the note before nightfall. More importantly, I hoped he'd take it seriously when he did. The drive back to headquarters took the same 3 hours as the trip up, but the unnamed forest road gave way to gravel, then pavement, then actual alleyways with traffic and cell phone coverage. Normal civilization, where the worst thing you had to worry about was running out of gas or getting a speeding ticket. I pulled into the parking lot AFD district office a little after noon. The building looked exactly the same as when I'd left. Brown brick, government tees architecture, American flag, hanging limp in the still air. I grabbed my gear and headed inside, nodding to the receptionist as I made my way to Oscar's office. He was at his desk, reading something on his computer screen. He looked up when I knocked on the doorframe. "Randy, how'd it go up there?" "Quiet week." I set my duffel down and took the chair across from his desk. No sign of those missing hikers. Covered a pretty wide area, but didn't find any traces. Oscar nodded, making a note in a file folder. "Well, we had to try. Thanks for taking that assignment on short notice." "No problem. I pulled out the topographical map and handed it back to him. Your replacement showed up right on schedule. Evan Ramirez seemed like he knew what he was doing. Good. Good. Oscar filed the map away and turned back to his computer. I'll need you to fill out the standard weekly report before you head home. Just the basics. Patrol routes. Weather conditions. Any wildlife observations? The report took about 20 minutes to complete. I kept it factual and brief, documenting my daily activities without mentioning anything unusual. Hiked the northern sector on Tuesday. Covered the eastern trails on Wednesday. Checked the creek area on Thursday. Weather clear, temperatures seasonal. Observed deer, squirrels, various bird species. No signs of missing persons, no incidents to report. It felt strange writing such a mundane summary of the week I'd just experienced. But what was I supposed to put? Encountered unknown entities that knew my personal information and tried to break down the cabin door. That would earn me a psychological AVN and probably a desk assignment for the foreseeable future. I signed the report and handed it to Oscar. He glanced it over and nodded approvingly. Looks good. Take the rest off the day off. You've earned it. I stood up to leave, then paused. Actually, I wanted to ask you about my next assignment. What have you got lined up for me? Oski looked up from the airport, frowning slightly. Next assignment. What do you mean? Well, Ramirez is covering the northern station now. I figured you'd have something else for me to work on. The frown deepened. Randy, what are you talking about? What northern station? A cold feeling started forming in my stomach. The monitoring station. The coordinates you gave me on Tuesday, where I just spent the last week. Oscar stared at me for a long moment, then turned to his computer and started typing. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, pulling up what looked like scheduling, records, and assignment databases. Randy, I'm not showing any assignment to a northern monitoring station. According to our system, you've been on administrative leave this week. The cold feeling spread upward into my chest. That's not right. You gave me the coordinates yourself in this office. Tuesday morning, you had the folder right there on your desk. Oscar's typing become more urgent, pulling up different screens and cross-referencing databases. I'm checking all our active monitoring stations. We've got facilities in the Southern District, the Eastern Watershed Area, and the Fire Tower Complex, but nothing at the coordinates you're describing. That's impossible. I leaned forward, watching the computer screen. Station 12. That's what the sign said. Forest. Service Station 12. Randy. Oscar's voice was careful. The way you would talk to someone who might be having a breakdown. We don't have a Station 12. Our numbering system only goes up to 8, and those are all accounted for. My mouth felt dry. Check Evan Ramirez's assignment. He should be logged as taking over from me this morning. More typing. Oscar pulled up what looked like a personnel roster and scrolled through the names. Found Ramirez and clicked on his record. Evan Ramirez, he's assigned to the Southern District Fire Prevention Unit, has been all week. According to this, he's been conducting gristcride burns down near the state line. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what Oscar was telling me. That can't be right. I just handed the station over to him 3 hours ago. We went through the whole briefing. Patrol routes, radio protocols, everything. Oscar turned the computer monitor so I could see the screen. Ramirez's assignment record was right there in black and white. Southern District Fire Prevention duties assigned Monday through Friday of this week. No mention of any northern monitoring station. Randy, I think we need to talk about where you've actually been this week. I sat there staring at the computer screen trying to make sense of what Oscar was telling me. The assignment record for Ramirez was right there in black and white. Southern District Fire Prevention duties. Monday through Friday. No mention of any monitoring station. That's not possible, I said. My voice sounded strange in the quiet office. I just left him there. We went through everything. The radio protocols, the patrol routes, where the supplies were kept. Hell, I showed him how to work the hand pump. Oscar leaned back in his chair and studied me. I'd known him for 8 years, and I'd never seen that expression on his face before. Not concern exactly. More like he was trying to solve a puzzle, and I was the missing piece that didn't fit anywhere. Randy, I need you to think about this carefully. You're telling me you spent a week at a monitoring station that doesn't exist talking to a ranger, who was actually 200 meters away doing controlled burns? I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. The words sounded crazy when he put it like that. But I could still feel the morning chill from that cabin. Still remembered the weight of my gear when I'd loaded it into the truck. My back OCD from sleeping on that narrow cot for 6 nights. Maybe you need more time off, Oscar said. His tone was gentle, the way you talk to someone who was fragile. Sometimes isolation can play tricks on your mind, especially when you're dealing with stress. Stress. That's what he thought this was. Some kind of breakdown. I stood up from the chair. I'm fine, Oscar. I know what I experienced. I'm sure you do, but the records don't lie. You've been on administrative leave all week. I signed the paperwork myself last Monday. Administrative leave. I tried to remember signing any paperwork. Tried Toracle, Oscar, mentioning time off. Nothing. Just that manila folder on my desk, with the coordinates written in his handwriting. The assignment sheet? I said. You give him the coordinates. Your handwriting? Oscar frowned. What assignment sheet? I reached for my shirt pocket, then stopped. The note I'd been thinking about was the one with the 4 rules. The yellowed paper. I'd found on the cabin table, but there had been an assignment sheet, hadn't there? Oscar had placed it on my desk that Tuesday morning, except now I couldn't quite picture it. The memory felt slippery, like trying to hold water in my hands. Randy, I think you should go home. Takia, few more days. If you want to talk to someone, the department has counselors. I don't need a counselor. But even as I said it, doubt was creeping in. The whole week felt solid in my memory, real as anything I'd ever experienced. The taste of that canned stew, the sound of my boots on the forest floor, the watt of the flashlight in my sweaty palm while those voices called my name in the darkness. My badge number. They'd known me badge number. I'll go home, I said. Oscar nodded. Take care of yourself. We'll talk next week. I walked out of his office and through the main room where 3 other rangers were processing paperwork. None of them looked up. Everything was normal, routine, exactly like it should be on a Friday afternoon. Like I hadn't just spent 7 days in a place that apparently didn't exist. The parking lot was half empty. My truck sat in the same spot where I'd left it that morning after driving back from the cabin. The same truck I'd loaded with gear 7 days ago, then unloaded at coordinates that weren't on any official map. I climbed behind the wheel and just sat there for a while. The afternoon sun was warm through the windshield, and I could hear traffic from the main road. Normal sounds, real sounds, not like that oppressive silence that had fallen over the forest. Every night at 1 a.m., my hand went to my shirt pocket without thinking about it. The paper was still there, folded exactly the way I'd left it. I pulled it out carefully and unfolded it on the steering wheel. For rules written in faded black ink on yellowed paper, the handwriting was careful and deliberate. Each letter formed with obvious thought. This wasn't something I'd imagined or dreamed. This was real paper, real ink, real words that someone had taken the time to write down. Rule 1. Keep all lights off between 1 and 3 a.m. No exceptions. Rule 2. If someone knocks during those hours, respond with, "There is no one here." Rule 3. Avoid all windows during the 1 to 3 a.m. period, completely. Rule 4. Ignore any sounds or voice outside during those hours, regardless of urgency or familiarity. I've read them 3 times just like I had that first day. The paper felt authentic between my fingers. Worn soft at the creases from being folded and unfolded. The ink had that faded quality that comes with age, not the sharp darkness off something written recently. This note existed. Whatever else might be confused or wrong about my memories, this physical evidence was sitting right here in my hands. Someone had written these rules? Someone had thought they were important enough to leave behind for the next person. I folded the paper back up and slipped it into my pocket. Then I started the truck and drove home. My house was a small ranch-style place, on the outskirts of town, nothing fancy, but comfortable enough for a man living alone. I bought it 5 years ago when I'd gotten serious about staying in this job long-term. The mortgage payment wasn't much, and I liked having space between him and my neighbors. I parked in the driveway and sat in the truck for a few more minutes. Looking at the front porch and the windows that needed new screens, everything looked exactly the way I'd left it. The newspaper was still on the steps where it had been thrown that morning. My coffee mug was probably still sitting on the kitchen counter where I'd left it before driving to the office. But had I left it there this morning? Or had I left it there a week ago before Oscar gave me that assignment? The memories were getting tangled up. I could remember both versions now. Leaving for the office this morning after a quiet week at home and leaving for the cabin 7 days ago with a truck full of gear. Both felt equally real, equally true. I went inside and walked through the room slowly. The kitchen was clean, the way I always left it. The coffee mug was in the sink, rinsed, but not washed. Normal. The living room looked undisturbed. My bedroom was neat, bed made, clothes hung up in the closet. Nothing suggested I'd been away for a week, but nothing suggested I'd been here either. I went to the bedroom and opened the top drawer of my nightstand. It was mostly empty. A few pens, some spare change, a small flashlight I kept for power outages. I took the folded note from my pocket hand, placed it carefully in the back corner of the drawer, behind everything else. The paper looked strange, lying there among my ordinary belongings. Too old, too weathered, like something that belonged in a museum instead of a bedroom drawer. But it was mine now. The only proof I had that something had happened, even if I couldn't prove what. I closed the drawer and sat on the edge of the bed. Outside, I could hear a dog barking somewhere down the street and the distant sound of someone mowing their lawn. Normal Friday afternoons, sounds in a normal town where normal people did normal things. But I wasn't normal anymore. I'd spend 6 nights following rules written by someone who understood that certain hours brought danger. I'd heard voices that knew my name and badge number. I'd felt the cabin shake under the weight of something pounding on the door with inhuman strength. And according to official records, none of it had ever happened. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep would be good. I'd been running on to little rest for days now, and my body was tired in ways that went deeper than just physical exhaustion, but he wasn't sure I wanted to sleep. Dreams might bring back those whispers, those measured footsteps circling in the darkness. The afternoon wore on. I made dinner, watched some television. Trito read a book. Normal activities that felt strange now, like I was playing a role in someone else's life. Every so often, I'd catch myself listening for sounds that didn't belong. Footsteps on the porch, scratching at the windows, voices calling my name. But there was nothing, just the ordinary sounds of evening in a quiet neighborhood. Around 10 o'clock, I went to bed. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., the way I always did, and turned off the lights. The darkness in my bedroom was different from the darkness in that cabin. Softer, somehow, less oppressive. Light from the street lamp filtered through the curtains, and I could hear cars passing on the road. I didn't set an alarm for 12:55. There were no rules to follow here. No need to count seconds in the darkness while something circled outside. This was my house, my life, my normal existence, but I kept the drawer close. The note was right there, just a few feet away. Proof that I hadn't imagined everything. Proof that, somewhere, somehow, there was a place where the rules mattered. And following them was the difference between safety and something much worse. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what to do next. Tonight, I just wanted to rest in my own bed and listen to normal sounds and pretend that everything made sense, but deep down, I knew I'd never speak about the cabin again. Who would believe me? Oscar thought I'd had some kind of breakdown. The record showed I'd been on leave. There was no Station 12, no monitoring assignment, no Evan Ramirez waiting to take over duties that didn't officially exist. I'd survived something that had never happened, and I'd carry that knowledge with me for as long as I lived. The note would stay in the drawer waiting. Sometimes late at night, when sleep wouldn't come, I'd take it out and read those for rules again. I'd remember the whispers and the scratching and the sound of my own voice saying, "There is no one here." To whatever had been pounding on that door, I'd remember, even if no one else ever would.